Okay, very good. Good afternoon, everyone. We're here for the, what's today? June 4th docket of the Baltimore Municipal Zoning Appeals, administrative hearings. A few preliminary items. I know some of you are veterans here. Please just turn off all your cell phones and no conversations. Everything is being recorded here by audio and also video recorded. So if you need to have a discussion, please take it outside. We have no postponements today. As you can see by the crowd, standing room only, we have a few matters. So no postponements, and we also have no matters on consent. And I don't believe we have any matters for which opposition has signed in as well. So we should be very efficient today. When I call your case, please stand to my left. There will be no opposition to my right. We'll hear staff reports, and then we'll get you to present your case. And we will vote on the appeals today, or heard today at the end of the docket. Anybody who wishes to stay can stay and hear that decision. Otherwise, you can give the office a call and talk to Mr. Baumgartner. It's a wonderful staff. Phone number is 410-396-4301. Again, that's 410-396-4301. As always, we ask that you not build in Baltimore City without proper permits. And a written decision on any appeal decided today will be provided within 3 weeks or so. Very good. With that, I will call the first case. Appeal number 2019-75, 3034.5 Pinewood Avenue, Patsy Coles. Given the shortness of the docket, we may go back to Ms. Coles before we retire today. Let's move on to the next case, 2019-94, 4301-21 Park Heights Avenue, 4300-20 Pimlico Road, and 2600-14 Rosewood Avenue. Alyssa Domzal. Purpose of the appeal to consolidate lots and construct new building with 84 dwelling units and tenant amenities. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Alyssa Domzal with Ballard's Bar.
Okay, welcome. You have all your folks here with you?
Yes, sure do.
Go ahead and ask for staff reports. Oh, yeah, you got to be sworn in before we do this.
All those here to attend, please, or here to testify, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we'll see if we have any staff reports for this one.
Yes, thank you. Planning Department reviewed this application, noted that this property is in the Park Heights Urban Renewal Area. The proposal is consistent with that urban renewal plan. The requirement for the 84 units would require a lot area variance, and the Planning Department does not object to that. The proposed development is going to require site plan review committee consideration, also architectural design review by the Urban Design and Architecture Advisory Panel. The department is recommending approval of the application, subject to the condition that all development, construction, landscaping, and improvement of this property be completed in accordance with plans approved by the Department of Planning. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Domzal, should the board look favorably upon your appeal, are those conditions acceptable to your client?
They are.
Okay. Tell us about your project.
Great. So we're here for an appeal to construct a 4-story multifamily building with 84 affordable residential units on 24 consolidated lots, which are currently owned by the Mayor and City Council, and which we are going to acquire pursuant to the Vacants to Value program. So with the email difficulties that everyone is having, of course, I don't believe the support letters made it into the file. We have support letters here from City Department of Housing and Community Development, Park Heights Renaissance, and Delegate Bridges.
Very good. Thank you.
So the property is in an R6 zoning district, and we are requesting variances for lot area, parking, and setbacks. As I mentioned, the property acquisition is being done through the city's Vacants to Value program, and pursuant to that process, my client presented this development plan to the city. And in awarding the development plan, the rights to acquire the property, the city reviewed and enthusiastically supported the development plan that we are about to present. So you're going to hear about a project for which the city has been a longtime champion of this development plan. So with me today is Marcus Pollack, the Executive Director of Park Heights Renaissance, and Pat Bateman with Penrose, the developer of the project, and Sam McKay-Richards, also with Park Heights Renaissance. So they can tell you more about the project.
Wonderful.
Good afternoon. Let me first offer a word of thanks for allowing us to present what I consider to be a pivotal project for Park Heights and the redevelopment effort. I'm sure you all know that Park Heights has suffered for many years from disinvestment, and this project that we're going to describe for you today is huge in terms of what it presents for the future of Park Heights. Let me say that it is located in an area that is commercial, and we're asking for, and we'll hear more about the increased density that we will be providing for there. And I should also say that this project comes out of the 2006 Park Heights Master Plan, which is the role that Park Heights Renaissance plays in terms of executing that plan that was originally codified in 2006 and amended in 2008. And as part of that plan, it has a vision of human services and in particular landscape changes that in many ways would be provided for, and this particular project would serve as the centerpiece for that redevelopment. If you give me just a couple of seconds, the view that I'm going to take you on is for the whole of Park Heights, just to give you a sense or a flavor of what it is that we're talking about in terms of our development agenda. So if you start at the mouth of Park Circle, we are in the process of developing a joint venture agreement to revitalize about 30 properties there. Moving up northward on Park Heights, you soon get to the Renaissance Row project, which is what we're proposing today. There is a community that is closely adjacent to that area that we call Loyola Northway, which is a whole block that we have acquired and are taking down some houses, creating some green space. Moving forward to Pimlico School, we have a 21st century school that has been created there, and you know as I do that the linchpin for any successful community is a good school. So we're focused on that in order to accommodate that for our community. Moving forward, we have Sinai Life Bridge. They have committed to, and I hope you've seen at least some of the news reports that have come out recently of $150 to $200 million of commitment and investment that they're making there. We are supporting faith-based organizations like Manna Baptist that is focused on developing that area of Silburn. 17.3 acres was offered by the city of Baltimore for redevelopment in what is called the major redevelopment area. There is another project that we are looking at today, in fact, that is a transit-oriented project that would be created close to the light rail line on Cold Spring Lane. So I say all this to say that this project is one of many, and I think that if we could get the approval of this body today and move forward with this, I think you'll see all sorts of things happening in Park Heights that haven't happened in almost a generation. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Good afternoon. The Vacants to Value application was submitted in May 2018 by Penrose and Park Heights, and that was to acquire the 24 lots that we're talking about today. As Alyssa mentioned, the the application was approved based on the redevelopment plan that we included in the application, which we believe is the highest and best use of the site. And the application also included a rendering of the proposed building, which is very similar to the current design iteration that we have been working on. The project itself, 4 stories, 84 units, roughly 2,400 square feet of that will be for Park Heights Renaissance new headquarters office, and it will also offer surface parking and amenities. The general contractor, commercial construction, they're a local Baltimore firm, and they're very committed to local hiring as much as possible. The amenities within the building will include a fitness room, a teen room, a courtyard, storage, and a multi-purpose room for residents to use. The unit mix itself will be 45 one-bedroom units, 35 two-bedroom units, and 7 three-bedroom units. And 8 of those units will be offered to residents earning up to 50% AMI, with the remaining 76 units being offered to residents earning up to 60% AMI.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, in the R6 zoning district, we are here for 3 variances: lot area, parking, and setbacks. So the minimum lot area in R6 is 1,500 square feet per unit, with 84 units on just over 63,000 square feet of lot area. The proposed building has a lot area of approximately 756 square feet per unit. So our proposal is 84 units, 42 would be permitted by right. This really isn't a question of micro units or anything like that. As you heard from Mr. Bateman, the unit mix, only about half of these are 1 bedroom, and the remainder are 2 and 3 bedroom units. These are intended to house families. The reason for the size of the variance is just that the very high minimum lot area requirement in an R6. So multifamily units are permitted by right, but they do have a very high minimum lot area per unit of 1,500 square feet. So that is why that variance is the size that it is. As you heard from Mr. Pollack, this is a part of a much greater vision for Park Heights, and the only way I think anyone believes this neighborhood is going to reach its potential is through density. And we want to see the units, we want to see the people going into the Park Heights Avenue corridor. This is, as Mr. Bateman mentioned, an affordable housing project. There's a recognized need for affordable housing, of course, throughout the city, but specifically in Park Heights. And with the type of financing that would be required to finance affordable housing, it simply would not be operationally efficient to have a 42-unit building. It just wouldn't work. You would not be able to get financing for that type of project between the management expenses and the amount of debt that would be needed. So that's why we are here today seeking a lot area variance. Regarding parking, for affordable units, it's 1 space per 2 units instead of 1 space per 1 unit, which is plus 1 space for 800 square feet of office. So it's the requirement is 42 spaces on the 84 units, plus 3 spaces for the office. And we are providing 35 spaces instead of 45. If you look at the site plan, you do see that a very large portion of the site is accommodating surface parking, but the lot is sort of strangely configured because we are only accepting what the city had to give us. So the site is not square, it's sort of juts out. It just does not have sort of what we would have ideally, which would be a square lot that would permit a larger parking lot. As you heard from Mr. Bateman, this is a site with high-class amenities, including a tenant courtyard. We could have tried to cut into more parking there, but it is essential to the project that this have tenant amenities just like any other project. And the last thing is there might be sort of 2 versions of the application, one showing 38 parking spaces and one showing 35. We received a comment from UDAP to remove 3 of the spaces that were not located correctly from an urban design perspective. So that is why we're here today seeking a parking variance. Lastly, the setback variances are on the front and the corner side. The front is on Park Heights Avenue. That would be 20 feet required. Ours is variable, going from about 1.5 feet to about 21 feet. And on the corner side, which is Rosewood Avenue, that is also 20 feet required, and that is variable from about 3.5 feet to just over 8 feet. Again, the smaller setbacks are required due to the lot configuration to accommodate the surface parking along the interior of the lot as well as the courtyard. So in conclusion, the site is a uniquely configured consolidation of lots. The row house lots facing Pimlico Road, the city did not acquire, and so they're sort of carved out, resulting in this sort of odd configuration. We do not have the block square, only what the city was able to assemble and convey through the vacancy to value program. Imposing the base zoning requirements for these three pieces would impose practical difficulty, as we would not be able to build essentially what we've promised the city that we would build in the vacancy to value application, which the city approved in approving the acquisition application. And lastly, at 42 units, we simply would not be able to meet the operational efficiencies that would be required to finance affordable housing. And for these reasons, we respectfully request that these variances be granted.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the board? I'm good.
I don't have any questions or questions.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Next, we'll call the case, appeal number 2019-142, 2700 through 2726 Mace Street. Michael Burton. And we have this matter to consolidate lots and construct new three-story building with 21 dwelling units. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right.
All those here to testify, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief?
I do.
All right. Okay, Mr. Burton, do we have any staff reports?
First, we have a letter from Charles Village Community Civic Association dated May 30th, 2019, that they indicate that they have had meetings with the immediate neighbors, that they are in support of the project, and that it will strengthen the quality of life of Charles Village with a well-designed three-story infill apartment building.
Planning Department reviewed this application. The department notes that there are requirements for variances for approval of this particular proposal. Also notes that this particular property was before this board previously for the purpose of creating a subdivision which would include 14 new townhouse units, and that required also some variances approved at that time. It also, of course, took quite a bit of time to negotiate with the neighborhood association. The department is acknowledging the fact that because of the recent difficulties with the city's systems, the applicant has not had an opportunity to have certain meetings that would otherwise have taken place before this. However, officially, for the record, the department is recommending deferral of this hearing to allow complete assembly of documentation for this proposal, more specifically a pre-development review meeting, a site plan review committee meeting, and an urban design and architectural review panel review of the proposal before the board actually makes the final decision on the request for approval of this application. Thank you.
Just one question, Mr. French. To the extent that the matter was deferred to allow those meetings to occur, do you have any sense of the timing we're talking about under which that would take place?
I don't. I would imagine that the site plan review meeting would happen within a couple of weeks. The UDAP, Urban Design and Architectural Advisory Panel meeting, basically probably would take about a month to get set up, I would imagine. And essentially, the issue is here that if the board grants specific variances, and then as a result of those meetings, there were revisions required to the proposal that's before you today that would in turn trigger changes to the variances that the board might approve, this matter might have to come back to the board. That's essentially the department's issue. It's a procedural issue. It's not an issue with the proposal itself.
So saying the appellant proceeding today would basically run that risk of possibly having to come back before this board.
That is correct.
You understand that?
We did.
Okay. Tell us about your project, if you would.
Okay. So we have a couple packets. If you like a packet to the side, we can hand out one or two so you can follow along.
Oh,
Okay, do you guys? Oh, okay, great.
we all do, actually.
Okay. So there are two subtle changes in that packet, just so that the planning department will have it. Essentially, we had come before the board and had taken all the way to permit the 14 houses. However, the market is not there for those houses. And we've seen that there is a market for an apartment building there. And so we've had a very long working relationship with the community. And we've also renovated other houses at their request in the neighborhood, sort of bring more home ownership within the neighborhood. And so we have basically went back to them and asked for support for providing an apartment building proposal. So essentially, all the variances that we're getting here today, and to sort of respond to planning things. So we've tried desperately to reach out to them. It didn't work out. We do have one of the meetings set up. It's going to be several weeks out. We've got a process that we have to go through so we can get this building in the ground in the fall. We've already gotten it worked out with stormwater management, approved on a red line, so they're already good to go going forward. All these drawings were engineered, so we know technically what our setbacks are. We've got them from our civil engineer, so they're tied in. And we will work with the planning department and understand that we need to go through pre-development and site plan review. And as far as architectural design, the architecture of the townhouses is the same architecture of the apartment building in the same scale. Effectively, the apartment building is half the size of what the townhouses were. Same height, 3 stories, same materials, same execution of the materials. So we don't foresee an arduous process with the planning department on that. We do see that the civil engineer will work with the planning department on landscape and making sure that those requirements are met. We want to go forward with the proposal so we can get this part done. We do understand if there was some technical thing that came up during site plan review that we may have to get another side yard setback variance or whatever, we will run that risk. We're okay with that. The project, also, the variances that we're asking for today, we're going to readdress this property to be 28th Street, not May Street. So the front of the building will be on 28th Street. It'll face 28th Street. That also goes in line with what the planning department would want, as you're on a street corner, facing the street corner with the building. And so the variances, and we're working with David Fram on that, on the change of the address. So the variances we're getting, the front yard is 28th Street, the side yards would be the alleys. The rear yard, there is no rear yard variance, and we're asking for a lot coverage variance for the project. So we're asking for 21 units or 22? 20, how many units? Hold on, Mark. 21 units. I'm like, 21 units. We're asking for 21 units, and we're providing 23 parking spaces for those units. And we're creating a small courtyard space sort of in the middle of the site that address some of the concerns of some of the neighbors, that they always were hoping to have some green space on this. It's a large parking lot right now, 60 feet by 310 feet, kind of sandwiched between the blocks of Maryland and Howard. And so we're creating right in the middle of the block some green space, and we're creating a buffer edge all the way along the houses on Howard Street so that the cars parking, there'll be a fence and shrubs so that they don't get the lights in their back window at night. What else do I need to say about it?
Mr. Burton,
Oh, and we're, yes.
When you submitted the application, did you submit something indicating about the change of address? Because I believe we calculated all the setbacks as if the property were going to be fronting on
Yeah,
Main
I said when I
Street.
came in that we were changing the address to 28th Street, but we have to go through that process. So we want to get a variance based upon that, so that when we get that done, that the variance is in line. Right, the variance would be nothing if we don't get the address change. That's on us, okay? We need to get that address, we want to get that, we don't need to get that address changed, but it makes sense for what we're doing on the setbacks. I mean, you can calculate it that way, and ultimately the address is going to get changed to 28th Street. I mean, it's going to be a 2801 28th Street.
Okay.
201, sorry.
I just bring that up because the variances, they're a very specific thing, right? There's a corner, side yard, front yard, and the degree of that variance is what follows the application through the whole process. So if we have the property fronting on Mace or fronting on 28th, and it's this, it's that, it's going to be this, it's going to be that, the actual degree of that variance is going to be changing.
Yep.
So that's
So-
why I just want to make sure that we all understand that
We do.
if we get an address changed, and then in the permitting process, they go to look at a setback, and they say, oh, you're violating the front yard setback, and the BMZA resolution doesn't address that setback, that's going to be on the applicant, because all that we have in writing is a property that fronts on May Street on June 4th, 2019.
Understand.
Got it.
So globally, we need to get through this part of the process because we've had a long relationship with the community for the bank to kind of get behind us and make this move. So you're going to initiate a bank process, and while that process goes on, we're going to complete the drawings and work with planning and property address to get those issues squared away. Those are technical issues as opposed to working with the community to make sure that they're okay having an apartment building on that site.
Is it your contention that the variances that'll be required if the front of the property was 28th Street, are the variance scope, I guess, is less than it would be?
No, there's no real difference, right? Like the side yard setbacks, we're asking for like a 3-foot side yard setback in one case as opposed to a 15-foot side yard setback, right, allowed. So we're creating issues on our side yard by switching the address. So we're not gaining any advantage by doing the setbacks a different address. We would still kind of have the same situation that we have now. We wouldn't have side yard setbacks, we'd have rear yard setbacks. So we're still creating setbacks by changing the address.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bell.
Yeah. One other thing that we want to point out, so the owners along Maryland Avenue, one of the things that they did like about our project in the past was that this property, on our side of the property, we're going to create a public sidewalk with street trees. And so we're still maintaining that sidewalk with street trees that we had in the townhouse development. Originally, the townhouses faced May Street, and so there was a sidewalk with street trees, and we're maintaining that along that sidewalk as well. Is there anything else that I can think of? That's basically it, to let you know what we're trying to do. I mean, it's technical, yes, but this variance, getting this part approved today is critical for the project to go forward and make sure that we make a good timeline. We know where we stand with planning, and we've tried to reach out multiple times, and the system's down, and hasn't been the easiest. Our civil engineer has reached out, and I think they have a preliminary date for us to get to them, just to initiate that process. But I perceive that we'll be working with planning probably well into August, which we don't want to come back here in September when we want to get in the ground. It would not.
Break ground into this fall, so we
Right.
beat the winter. If there's a delay, it could push us into spring.
Nobody
No one
wants
really
that, right.
Can I get your name for the record, sir?
Mark Shapiro, M-A-R-K, Shapiro, S-H-A-P-I-R-O.
Thank you, sir.
Is there anything else you'd like to submit for the record?
You have our application, so I'll be clear on the variances I was requesting, right? So front yard, we had I believe we're asking for, instead of 10 feet, 4 feet, the front yard would be 28th Street. Side yard on May Street would be 3 feet 6 inches as opposed to 15 feet. Side yard on the alley would be 3 feet as opposed to 15 feet. And then we have a lot coverage, regardless of the orientation. That's what we're requesting.
Okay. You got that?
And Mr. Chairman, what we'll do is we're going to recalculate the variances based on that information.
Appreciate it.
If there's any issue with those, if anything comes up, we'll let the board know. And if we have to pull it back, we'll simply pull back the case.
Okay.
But barring anything, any red flags with that reorientation of the property address, I think we can move on the project, or move on the case.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Longwelder. Any further questions from the board?
Nope.
Thank
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your project, for your
Thanks,
information. Ma'am?
I'm Sandy Sparks from the Charles Village Civic Association.
Yes, ma'am, sorry.
Given the amount of work we've put into this, I would like to say how well we've worked with the developers, and this is our second time around. And this was actually much easier because the community, the immediate neighbors, we had special meetings in both times with the immediate neighbors, so they all had access to what was happening. So the response to this creation of an apartment building on a much smaller footprint on the lot was very well received immediately. And they like very much the idea that there's much more greening on the lot. And I think having the building face 28th Street makes total sense. And it also, by having a sidewalk along May Street, it creates good pedestrian access. It's a very wide street, actually, in good condition, happily, so that people can cross through there. And I did submit a maintenance agreement that we have, so,
Would you like that agreement incorporated into the board's decision if it's approved?
yes, yes.
Very well. And the applicant is accepting of that?
Yeah, we're totally in agreement with that. It's signed.
Fully executed.
Yeah.
Very well. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Appreciate your information. Okay, this time we'll recall the case of appeal number 2019-75, 3034 and a half Pinewood Avenue. Patsy Coles.
Yes, please, if you don't mind. Yeah, thank you.
Just observing.
The fastest docket of all time.
It changes all the calculations.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. This is case number 2019-75, 3034 and a half Pinewood Avenue. Patsy Coles, and the purpose of the appeal is to increase from 2 dwelling units to 3 dwelling units. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. We have the witness sworn.
Can you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ms. Coles. I know you were here once before, and we discussed this issue of the effort to increase property from 2 dwelling units to 3 dwelling units, but we have staff reports regarding this property.
Yes, as I believe we may have stated in the previous partial hearing of this, the applicant is requesting to put a 3rd unit in the basement of this property. The planning department believes that this represents an increase of a nonconforming use, which is an expansion of nonconforming use that's prohibited by the zoning code, specifically section 18-302A. The department is therefore recommending disapproval of this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Coles, from the last time you were here, is there any, well, first of all, is there any additional information you'd like to add for our review?
Okay, I think there might be a misunderstanding of add an additional unit. The unit is not being added. The basement has been there since the house has been built back in 1955. So it's not a new or additional unit. It's been there. I am requesting that it be listed and registered with Baltimore City as living quarters because someone has already been living there for years.
Do you have any proof that it's been used as a separate dwelling unit?
Well, the only proof that I have would be the electric bill that I don't have with me. The couple that I bought the house from, their niece lived there.
Okay.
So there is a separate, there was, when I purchased it, a separate electric bill.
Do you have a photograph of the separate meters or?
I do.
Wait a minute. We did, yeah, we went through this.
I think I have.
And ma'am, as you're looking for that information, again, is this the same information that was presented the last time you were here?
Okay, well, the last time that I was here, I think I was told that you all misunderstood that I wasn't asking that a new unit be installed. I was asked, it's already there, it's been there. And yes, I do have the pictures, so, I was later told that you all thought it was going to be an addition. It's not an addition.
Well, I don't think we misunderstood anything. I think what we were asking for was proof of the prior existence of the number of dwelling units that you were looking to have.
So the city records for this property show a lawful use of 2 dwelling units. There is a functional equivalent of using a space as a dwelling or living there. Then there's the legally authorized use of space. So it's entirely possible that someone was living in the basement, but from the city's perspective, from property registration and from the zoning records, all we see are 2 dwelling units, a history of 2 dwelling units in this property at some point in time. So the addition of the 3rd dwelling unit is not necessarily new construction. It's not the addition of anything other than the actual use increasing from 2 dwelling units to 3 dwelling units. And as we've discussed, in this particular zoning district, multifamily dwellings are prohibited. They're flatly not permitted. So any property owner having a lawfully existing 2 dwelling unit property could keep those 2 dwelling units. The addition of that 3rd dwelling unit becomes the problem. So the board at the last hearing requested additional information showing that that 3rd dwelling unit was lawfully established at some point in time. It could have been decades ago. There are several permits recently filed, including a use and occupancy permit that was essentially put on hold for 2 dwelling units, and that was from 2018. And then there were several essentially utility permits that were applied for but never granted. So again, the board was looking for more evidence, more information about the legal authorization for that 3rd dwelling unit in the basement.
Well, that's not what I understood. I understood that you all thought I was constructing the basement to be a living unit, and I stated the last time that I was here that someone was already living there.
Well, as Mr. Baumgartner just explained.
Yeah, I understand what he's saying now. So do you still want to see the pictures, or is that going to make a difference? I also have constructed a listing of what this has cost to this point, and that no one informed me that 3 dwellings was not allowed. I did what I was told to do by the city. Step by step, each process, filing for the registration, going to occupancy and use, filing and paying there, getting it inspected, being told what needed to be done. This was all by the city, not by Patsy Coles. This was the things that I was told to do.
Were you told to also get a use and occupancy permit for 3 dwelling units?
Yes, and I showed you paperwork the last time that I was here where I filed for 3.
No, ma'am, you filed for
that's
2.
not accurate.
There's a use and occupancy permit under your name as the applicant and the property owner requesting, it says existing count, 2 dwelling units, proposed count, 2 dwelling units. The 3rd dwelling unit accompanied this appeal. So you would have had to have filed for that in order to get up here. But this permit from 2018, under your name and signature, says you're requesting use of the property as 2 dwelling units.
I don't have that paperwork with me at this moment. My husband drove my car to New Jersey, so unfortunately, all that is in my car. But all the paperwork that I showed you the last time that I was here, it stated 3.
Ma'am, what is required is to obtain a use and occupancy permit for 3 units if you want to lawfully change it to 3 units. And it appears that that permit was never requested for 3 dwelling units, which is an impediment to having 3 lawful dwelling units and evidence of having, I don't know that that would even satisfy the requirement or your burden to demonstrate that you had 3 dwelling units that were lawfully used, because you can't increase it from 2 to 3 if it was never 3.
Well,
And so there's, what I'm saying to you is, the information you provided, we reviewed. And as a consequence of that review, we requested that you provide additional information, to the extent you had it, evidencing the lawful use of 3 dwelling
A
units.
history that the unit has been used, that the basement has been used as a separate dwelling unit would include a history of BG&E bills for that unit dating back like a decade, pictures of the separate meter, things of that nature. Lease agreements showing that that was specifically leased to somebody else, that it was a
Okay.
separate unit.
when I purchased the home, the couple Karen and Richard Guilford told me that their niece lived in the basement and had a separate meter.
So that would be
So
2 units,
that
right?
was in, it was already 2. Upstairs and the first floor was already 2. But the basement and the first floor shared a meter, which is what I'm trying to do now, is separate that, because the basement and the first floor would have to share the bill.
So what you're saying is there's 2 meters for the property, and the basement and the first floor share a meter? There aren't
Yes.
3 meters.
There was 2 meters there. The upstairs has a separate meter. That's where the couple who owned the home lived. The basement and the second floor and the first floor shares a meter.
Which suggests to me
unit.
that there were 2 units in the property, and that it was that they may have had someone living in the basement, but they weren't living there in a legal way. That they weren't that wasn't being the legal use for that
Yeah,
property.
it evidences that there are 2 lawfully allowed dwelling units, 2 meters, and you have one of the units being shared. They may have an independent agreement as between them as to rent being paid, so on and so forth. That doesn't get it to the point that it's required to make it allowable as 2 separate units for the basement and the first floor. Unfortunately, it sounds like what they told you, certainly may have been accurate, may have been true, that there were several folks living in the home. But what they could not have stated is that there were 3 lawful dwelling units, because there's no evidence supporting that. And that's what we require in order to, frankly, grant your appeal.
Okay, well, the point is that I still did what I was told to do by the city of Baltimore. And I feel that if that wasn't possible at that time, I should have been informed that, ma'am, you can't do this. You can't make this a 3 dwelling unit. At no time was I told that this could not be done, not by BG&E, not by the contractor, not by the plumber, not by the electrician, not by the city of Baltimore.
I suspect that if a permit had been requested and submitted for 3 dwelling units, that would precisely be what you would.
A permit was requested, sir.
Well, we don't have the evidence of that, ma'am. That's what I'm telling you. The record is before us for the official documents that the city has. If there is some other document that you have which says something different, that was the purpose of presenting today. Any additional information?
Okay. The paperwork that I completed, I stated 3 units.
Okay.
I requested for 3 units, and I specifically wrote on there basement.
I understand it wouldn't, even if you submitted that paperwork, it doesn't substantiate that there were ever 3 legal units there. And that's what we would have to know, that there was a history, that the property had been like legally used as 3 dwelling units for us to make a decision.
Yes. Someone would or should have flagged that request for 3 dwelling units, because it was an obvious request to increase the number in a zone that does not permit such an increase.
Okay, so it's my fault that $40,000 approximately has been spent and thrown down the drain.
Well, I believe the city requires that anybody looking to utilize a particular property in a certain way, ergo 3 dwelling units, has the burden to request that permit. We don't see such a request in the record. And all I'm saying is, had such a permit been requested, at that point, someone could and should have alerted you that that would not have been allowed, and perhaps you could have foregone that expense. But, you know, you have your facts that you present as to who you talked to and who you spoke with. As a zoning matter, unfortunately, there's no relief we can give you for that here. You're requesting variances and you're requesting us our approval, but we are limited by what it is we can do based on the zoning code. And the zoning code, as presently constituted, doesn't allow and doesn't permit us to grant that relief from 2 units to 3 units, given the circumstances that are presented.
Okay, even though all the others in my neighborhood, 4 houses to the right of mine are 3 dwelling units.
We can't conclude based on any of those other units. We don't know what's in them or what their particular paperwork status or history is. I don't know the permitting status of those homes. All we're dealing with is 3034 and a half Pinewood Avenue. And unfortunately, that location seems to be lacking the documentation to permit the board to grant your
Okay, well,
appeal.
like I said, and I still say that somewhere along the lines, I should have been informed that 3 was not allowed. I followed the process that the city gave me. I did exactly what they told me to do. They sent an inspector out. He didn't say anything about it can't be 3 dwellings. He did not say that, Mr. Campbell.
Did you have your contractor request the permits?
I hired a plumber and a gas fitter, and they are licensed, and you should have that information as to whom they are. And yes, they did apply for a permit.
I could suggest that you could have a conversation with those individuals as to what permit they
Okay, he
actually-
said he had the information when I talked to him. He said he had the information for who applied for the permits. I think at that time, he told me he didn't have a permit from BG&E.
There was one utility permit that was requested and issued, but it doesn't indicate any change in use, any additional dwelling units or anything like that. It's simply a permit that says we're doing utility work. I'm still stuck on this use and occupancy permit from 2018 that says 2 dwelling units, and that is accurate.
And it
for
appear-
2 dwelling unit building, which has your name on it, ma'am.
Okay, can I see that, please? Because everything that I recall showing you the last time that I was here is stated 3.
I'm sorry, Mr. Baumgartner, what's the date on that application for the use and occupancy permit?
This was filed on September 7th, 2018, the $98 filing fee. Existing dwelling units 2, proposed dwelling units 2. And the note on the permit activity says, apparently there was an inspection and no one was at the property, so they had to reschedule. And then it says, Inspector English canceled due to need to get final gas inspection, reinstate gas permit. The permit is voided out. Needs a final inspection for the utility work. And that use and occupancy permit application.
And then that's signed by the applicant. Patsy Coles.
Okay, this, I'm talking, do you have something in my handwriting that says, that I apply for two? Because I know I never stated two.
All use and occupancy permits are e-filed. There is no paper application any longer. That was done away with 3 years ago.
Okay. All right, is there an appeal?
Yes, all decisions by the board are appealable to the Circuit Court for Baltimore City within 30 days after the board's written resolution. So
Okay.
you'll be receiving that in the mail.
So after I get the resolution from you in writing, I can file for an appeal?
That's correct.
Okay, are you done with me?
Yes, are you done with us?
Yes.
Very well.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Have a nice day.
Okay.
Really helps when you have an attitude.
Yeah, well, that wasn't gonna get any positive points.
And we're off the record?
Off the record.
Anything
Couldn't
anybody
have
needs to
been more
discuss?
pleasant or polite to that person. You were delightful.
You were.
Was the extension that was on, was that handled at the beginning?
Yeah, the extension granted for 12 months? Second one?
East 21st Street,
Yeah,
both
East
were granted.
They were granted?
Yep.
Yeah, 12 months. Thanks.
Okay. I think we're good.
I'm good.
I'm good.
Okay, all right. 2019-75, 3034 and a half Pinewood